Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from MaliciousCompliance. Story 1 is by Carl0071. Employer only paid us on time if we faxed our timesheets. This happened about 10 years ago when I was working on the rails near London. I worked for an agency which supplied staff to the railways on a temporary basis. They were very old-fashioned, and as part of our employment contract, they stated that our hand-completed timesheets had to be faxed by 7 p.m. on Thursday for us to be paid on the Friday. Timesheets that were emailed even before 7 p.m. would result in wages not being paid until the following Friday. Obviously, they chose the most inconvenient way, as it was 2014 and nobody had a fax machine, so that they were able to legally retain our wages in their account for an extra week. But my printer at home has a fax machine built in that I never used. So after my first week, I plugged in my printer to the phone line, faxed my timesheet to the agency, and waited. The next day, I still hadn't been paid. So I phoned them and asked why I hadn't been paid, but the response was explained in a dull voice by somebody who had obviously repeated the same sentence so many times that it lost all meaning to her. As explained in your contract, only timesheets that have been faxed to us are paid the next day. If you've emailed it, your wages will be paid the following week. But I did fax it. She gathered her thoughts for a moment by replying, "Oh, okay. Which number did you fax it to?" So I gave her the number I faxed it to, which was correct. Okay. I'll just place you on hold." She came back on the phone a couple minutes later. "Okay, yes, we've got it. Sorry, I can't remember the last time someone actually faxed their timesheet to us. I'll get that paid now." As you can imagine, I told my colleagues the following day, and from then on they all gave their timesheets to me to fax when I got home, so they got paid on time. At the time I wondered if they'd ever drop the silly fax versus email rule, but it continued, so every week I'd fax in half a dozen timesheets to them. It's crazy to me that people still have faxing, but there's some places where the infrastructure is so dated that that's all they have. But this, of course, led to some people also sharing stories of their own, from fax machine prehistory, by A Monkey and a Lava Lamp. I remember about 20 years ago I had a car accident and the company refused to take the statement in any way other than the fax. The accident happened during a trip to a different province where the company didn't have an office. So I typed the statement, detail the damages part by part in Word using size 48, and used the fax/modem feature on the laptop for the first time in my life to send it over. When I came back, the girl that worked in the insurance office in my town told me it took 2 rolls of fax paper to print the entire thing, and she had to submit it to the headquarters in a binder because it didn't fit in the standard envelopes used to send claim statements. That right there is the way to do it. Put it in some giant font and just claim you didn't know how to shrink it down any. There's plenty of places out there that are still using technology from the 80s. Anything to save a buck. Our next story today is by SquirrelMaster75. Sorry, you told me to leave you alone. When I was around 15 or 16, a friend and I went to the local mall on the weekend to hang out and hit the arcade. After a bit, we decided to get a drink at the food court. While we were standing in line, an older man, late 30s or early 40s, looking like he just got out of the gym, decided to cut the line in front of us. The line was fairly long at this point, around 10 people deep. They had the best lemonade in the mall. I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Sir, we're in line here." He shot us a look and turned back around, pretty much ignoring the fact that we were there. When he got nearer to the register, he reached into his pocket to take out his wallet. As he did so, a wad of cash fell out onto the floor, unnoticed by him. As rude as he was, I was raised to be courteous and respectful. I picked up the cash and said, "Excuse me, sir." At which point he replied, without even turning to look at me, "Shut up and leave me the F alone." I turned back to look at the older gentleman behind us who just smiled and shrugged. So I placed the cash in my pocket. When it was time for him to pay, he opened his wallet to discover that there was no cash in it. He quickly turned and scanned the floor. When he didn't find the money, he asked us if we'd seen him drop it. My friend said, "Can't help you. We were told to shut up and leave you the F alone." He was a bit spicy, he ranted, but in the end he walked away without his money. Turned out there was $147 in there. Nice haul for a broke kid in the early 90s. Another time, when I was just a little older, I had gone to Wally World. I purchased something fairly inexpensive and paid the cashier. She handed me back around $87 in change. I said, "Ma'am, I think you gave me the wrong change." She looked at it and told me that she had it right. I responded, "But ma'am..." She cut me off, spitting mad, and went into a rant about how she was very good at math. I let her finish and simply said, "Okay, sorry to bother you, ma'am." I then took my leave. I wonder how she felt about her math skills when she counted her drawer after her shift. What I was trying to tell her was that I had paid with a 20, not a Benjamin. It seems like everybody has a story to share about something like this, the wrong bills being paid. Down in the comments by Equivalent Salary 357, when I returned from Vietnam in 1971, I decided to buy a motorcycle with the money that had built up in the year that I was deployed. To speed up the process, I decided to pay cash. Note, cash would be slower now, but cash purchases were common and easy then. I got in the car after withdrawing the cash from my savings account, pulled the cash out of the envelope, and looked at the biggest pile of cash money I had ever seen. Then I counted it and discovered I had been given $20 too much. I counted it a second and third time with the same results. Back in the bank, I stood in the same line as earlier and waited. The cashier kept glancing back at me until I arrived in front of her. I attempted to explain, but she cut me off and refused to even talk with me, asking if I wanted to speak with the manager. Rather than try to explain, I agreed that I wanted to speak to the manager. The manager was at her side in less than a minute. When I got in my car, I recounted my withdrawal and realized she gave me $20 too much, but she said she can't correct the mistake since I left the building. He gave her a look, and she started turning red when he asks, "Think you can take care of this?" She nodded without saying anything. And we didn't say a word to each other, as she was, in fact, able to take care of it. And underneath that, by Zombie 13A, my mom once deposited a check with a teller and put the receipt in her checkbook for later use. When she got home later and went to update the check register, tells you how long ago this was, she found that the teller had mistakenly added an extra zero to the deposit, from $1,000 to $10,000. Mom called the bank and talked to the manager. Started out by saying, "I think one of your tellers made a mistake." Manager replied that their tellers don't make mistakes. So Mom, who hadn't given the name of the account or anything, said something to the effect of, "Then I guess you just gave me $9,000, and hung up the phone. A little while later, the bank manager called and humbly apologized and asked for permission to withdraw the $9,000 that was mistakenly deposited into Mom's account to correct the error. One time I was traveling across Canada and I stayed at a hotel and I paid cash for the room, but they also required your debit card for incidentals in case something happened to the room. So I paid cash for the room and then I gave them my card for incidentals. I did get a receipt, but it was lost in transit afterwards. When we got to our final destination and I waited a couple days to see if the money would come back to me for nothing wrong with the room, no incidentals required to pay for it, they never sent the money back to my card. So I called the place and I said to the manager, I paid cash, but I also left my debit card. And the manager was so aggressive and rude. She said her people don't make mistakes and I shouldn't leave money on the counter, which is not what happened. I handed them cash. I didn't put the money on the counter and somebody picked it up. That didn't happen. But she went off on me, and she probably gets lots of people who actually try to scam her, but she didn't listen at all. And she said that her workers are infallible and that sort of thing would not happen. And she would not pay me back the money for it. So I tried going above her, and even they wouldn't do something about it. So all I could do was raise a complaint with the ombudsman after that. It was awful. I basically lost like $157 or something. So essentially I paid twice. I paid in cash and I paid on a debit card. But she didn't give the money back, and she stuck up for her people 100% through the entire time. Not everybody is trying to rip you off. Our last story today is by Plexiferous. Karma is a B word, and so was she. Story from quite a few years ago, from when I was a bartender in a corporate-style cookie-cutter restaurant. I mostly worked nights, but had one regular mid-shift on Friday. We were always super busy at the bar for lunch on Fridays, and usually had quite a few of the mall workers coming in to eat then head back to work. Nearly every Friday, the same smug, borderline rude lady came in for lunch. Every time she paid exact change. 0 tip. Maybe half the time she would complain over some minor inconvenience, and more than a few times got a comped meal. The more I had to wait on her, the more indignant and pissed I got. So, around Christmas time, I was out and about in the mall buying for family and friends. Picked out something nice for my girlfriend at the time, a sheer top which I thought would look amazing on her. Decently priced with it being on sale, too. Walking up to the cashier, I was a bit surprised to run into resting B-word face. Whatever. In street clothes, I feel like she barely registered who I was, or maybe she really didn't care who was at her register, maybe both. So, I handed her a $20 bill. She examines it for a moment, turned it over twice, held it up to the light even. Then, out comes the counterfeit pen marker. Thinking to myself, a bit excessive, no? Change should have been around $1 and change. Surprisingly, she hands out $81 plus change. She calls next in line, so I step to the side for a moment in contemplation. I could honestly feel the devil on one shoulder and angel on the other. Took me a moment or two, but I finally let my moral compass win and stepped back in front of the register. I nicely explained that there was a mistake made, but before I could continue, she shot me down and briskly told me in a semi-professional tone to get the F out of here. So, I did. The way I look at it, all those lost tips and the money she just gifted me was just karma. Sucked to be her, I guess. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have an excellent day.